My father died and left a will that nobody expected. There was a hidden clause that said whoever inherited the company would have to take on the debts of all the other heirs. My siblings ran away. I stayed, and I discovered that my father had planned everything from the beginning. But before I tell you how I ended up with an empire for free, I need to take you back, because this story doesn't start with my father's death. It starts much earlier, with a man who built a kingdom from scratch and knew exactly what each of his children was capable of doing. My father's name was Eduardo Silva. He was born in 1952 in a favela in Rio de Janeiro. His mother washed clothes for other people. His father was a construction worker when there was work. They lived in a wooden shack with 5 children. My father was the oldest. At 8 years old, he was already selling popsicles on the beach. At 12, he worked in a mechanic shop after school. At 15, he dropped out to work full-time. He told me once that the turning point of his life happened when he was 19. He was working as an assistant in a construction materials store. The owner was an old Portuguese man with no children who treated my father like family. One day, the old man called my father into the office and said, "Eduardo, you're smart, smarter than most, but smart isn't enough. You need to learn to read people, to know who will help you and who will betray you." My father never forgot that. He started observing everything, how people talked, how they behaved when they thought nobody was watching, who kept their word and who made up excuses. At 23, with the money he had saved, my father opened a small hardware store. It wasn't anything special, but he had a gift. He could talk to anyone. He knew when to give a discount, when to push the price, when to do a favor that would come back multiplied in the future. In 5 years, he had 3 stores. In 10, he had a distribution company. In 15, he owned one of the biggest construction materials companies in the state. He married my mother, Clara, at 26. She was the daughter of an accountant, had studied education, was everything my father wasn't. Calm, organized, educated. They had 4 children. I'm the youngest. My oldest brother, Roberto, was always the favorite. At least that's what everyone thought. Business degree, MBA abroad, always well-dressed, always saying the right things. My father put him in the company's management at 28. Roberto loved to show off, give interviews, go to events, post photos on social media showing off his lifestyle. Imported cars, trips, expensive watches, all paid for by the company, of course. My middle sister, Patricia, was a lawyer. She married a rich businessman and kind of distanced herself from the family. She showed up at year-end parties, always complaining that her share of the company's profits was small. She never worked at the company, but thought she deserved to receive as much as those who did. My other brother, Felipe, was the opposite of Roberto. Never wanted to work, lived off an allowance, even after 30. Tried to open some businesses with my father's money, all failed. Had a new girlfriend every 6 months, all gold diggers. He burned through money like there was no tomorrow. And me? I was always the forgotten one, the youngest that nobody took seriously. I studied history because I liked understanding how things happened. My father laughed at my choice. "History doesn't pay bills," he would say. I worked as a teacher for some years, earning nothing, but I liked it. I liked researching, understanding patterns, seeing how past decisions shaped the present. I visited my father once a month. We would have coffee, talk about random things. He never talked much about the company with me. I thought it was because he didn't see me as someone capable of understanding that world, but I was wrong. When my father turned 70, he gathered everyone for a dinner. It was strange. He was quiet, different. He made a generic toast, thanked everyone for being there, but he looked at each of us in a weird way, like he was studying us. 2 years later, my father had a stroke. He was hospitalized for 3 weeks. We thought he wouldn't survive, but he was strong, always was. He left the hospital different, slower, but lucid. He became quieter after that, talked less, observed more. It was during this time that he started making changes in the company. He removed Roberto from some important positions, put outsiders in trusted roles. Roberto was furious, but my father gave no explanation. He just said, "It's what's best for the company." My mother died when I was 32. Cancer. It was fast, aggressive. My father was devastated. He had always been tough, controlled, But after my mother died, something in him broke. Not on the outside, on the inside. He became colder, more calculating, like he had decided he couldn't trust anyone anymore. 3 years after my mother's death, my father had another stroke. This time it was fatal. He died at home, sleeping. He was 77 years old. The funeral was big. Lots of people. Politicians, businessmen, people I had never seen. My siblings were all in black, looking sad, but I could see it in their eyes. They weren't sad. They were calculating, thinking about the inheritance. A week later, my father's lawyer scheduled the reading of the will. It was a big, fancy office downtown. We sat around a huge table. The lawyer, Dr. Antonio, was a serious man with glasses, about 60 years old. He had a thick folder in front of him. "Before we begin," he said, "I need everyone to understand that this will was personally drafted by Mr. Eduardo with complete clarity of mind and reviewed multiple times over the last 3 years. He was aware of every word written here." Roberto was impatient. "Just start already." Dr. Antonio opened the folder and began reading. The first paragraphs were standard. My father left the beach house to Patricia, an apartment in Copacabana to Felipe, some stocks and investments to each one, values that added up to a few million for each of my siblings. And then came the part about the company. The company, Silva Construction Materials, with all its subsidiaries, assets, accounts, properties, and operations, will be inherited by a single heir. This heir will be chosen among my 4 children, following the criteria described below. The room went silent. Dr. Antonio continued. "The heir who accepts to keep the company must, as a mandatory and irrevocable condition, assume all personal debts of the other 3 heirs. This includes bank debts, loans, financing, credit card debts, and any other type of financial obligation existing at the time of my death or in the 6 months prior." My siblings' eyes widened. Patricia was the first to speak. "This is ridiculous. Who the hell would accept something like that?" Dr. Antonio raised his hand. "Please, let me finish. If no heir accepts these conditions within 30 days, the company will be sold and the value will be divided equally among the 4. However, before the division, all personal debts of the heirs will be paid with the sale value." Felipe gave a nervous laugh. "This makes no sense. Why would he do this?" I was quiet, processing. My father had architected something. I just didn't know what yet. Dr. Antonio continued. "There's one more clause. The heir who accepts the conditions will have access to all financial records of the other heirs from the last 10 years. This is necessary to calculate the exact value of the debts." Roberto slammed the table. "This is an invasion of privacy. I'm going to contest this will." "That's your right," Dr. Antonio said calmly, "but the will was drafted within all legal norms, and Mr. Eduardo made it clear that if the will is contested, the company will be immediately sold and the value will be donated to charity. None of you would receive anything." The room exploded. My siblings started yelling. Patricia called my father crazy. Felipe said he would sue Dr. Antonio. Roberto was red with anger. I remained quiet, thinking. After half an hour of chaos, Dr. Antonio banged on the table. "You have 30 days to decide. Until then, the company will continue operating normally under the temporary management of the current directors. Any attempt to interfere will result in violation of the will." We left in silence. Everyone went their separate ways. Nobody spoke for days. I went home and started researching. It's what I knew how to do. Investigate, put pieces together, understand patterns. I called Dr. Antonio and scheduled a meeting. He received me the next day. "You want to see the financial records?" he asked. "I do." He gave me access to everything, and that's when I started to understand my father's plan. Roberto had debts of almost 8 million reais. He had taken personal loans using shares as collateral, had maxed out credit cards, had financed cars and properties he couldn't pay for. He lived a lie. The image of success was false. He was drowning. Patricia owed 3 million. She and her husband had invested in failed businesses.
financial pyramids, shell companies. Her rich husband was actually broke. They were being sued by several creditors. Felipe owed $4 million. Online casinos, sports betting. He had an addiction nobody knew about. Besides that, he had taken loans from loan sharks, dangerous people. He was afraid of being killed. In total, my siblings owed 15 million reais. My father's company was worth, according to the last evaluation, 120 million reais. No debts, completely clean. I understood everything in that moment. My father knew. He always knew who his children were. He had observed, like the old Portuguese man had taught him. Roberto was vain and irresponsible. Patricia was greedy and careless. Felipe was weak and addicted. And me? I was the only one who had never asked for anything, the only one who had built my own life, even if modest. My father had set a perfect trap. Whoever accepted to keep the company would have to pay 15 million in debts from the others, but in exchange would get 120 million clean. It was a brilliant deal, but only for someone who didn't have debts. I had no debts. I lived simply, had a small house paid off, an old car, didn't spend more than I earned. My siblings, on the other hand, would never accept, because accepting meant exposing their lies, meant everyone would know how much they owed, meant losing the image, the pride, the facade. I waited, let the 30 days pass almost completely. My siblings said nothing. None of them accepted. On the 29th day, I called Dr. Antonio. I accept the conditions. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? Do you understand what this means? I understand perfectly. You'll need to pay 15 million reais in your siblings' debts. I know, and I will pay. The next day, we signed the papers. The company was transferred to my name, and with it, the obligation to settle my siblings' debts. My siblings found out a few hours later. Roberto called me furious. "You're an idiot! You just inherited 15 million in debts!" "And 120 million in assets," I replied calmly. He hung up on me. In the following months, I restructured everything, sold some non-essential assets, renegotiated contracts, optimized operations, and paid one by one all my siblings' creditors. Roberto had to return the imported car, the luxury apartment, the watches. Patricia and her husband had to move to a smaller place. Felipe entered a rehab clinic that I paid for, but only after having a serious conversation with him about life. I became CEO of the company, and I discovered that my father had left letters, one for each of my siblings, and one for me. Mine said, "Son, if you're reading this, it means you accepted. It means you understood. I always knew you were different. You never asked me for anything, never tried to show off, never tried to impress me. You simply lived your life with honesty. That's rare, rarer than you imagine. Your siblings are my children, and I love them, but they're weak. They don't know the value of things. Maybe now, without debts, they'll have a chance to start over. Or maybe not. But you'll take good care of what I built, because you understand it's not about money, it's about character. It always was. I love you. Your father." 3 years have passed since then. The company has grown 40%. I hired competent people, modernized processes, invested in technology, and most importantly, I learned to lead. Roberto works today as a consultant, earns well, but nothing compared to what he had before. He respects me now. Patricia opened a small law practice. She's happy for the first time in years. Felipe has been clean for 2 years. He works with me in the company, in a smaller role, but he's learning. Sometimes I think about my father, about the man who came from the favela and built an empire, about the man who taught me, without saying a word, that true power isn't in showing off, it's in understanding people, in observing, in waiting for the right moment. He gave me much more than a company. He gave me a lesson I'll carry forever. The most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's knowing who you are and staying true to that, even when nobody's watching. So, yes, my siblings ran away, and I stayed with the clean empire. But it wasn't luck, it was planning. It was a father who knew his children better than they knew themselves, and who decided, in the end, to reward not the one who shouted loudest, but the one who had remained quiet and true. If this made you think, subscribe to the channel.